Hello and welcome back to Ruben Uncut. Today I am here speaking with my second politician for me to speak with. Please welcome to the show, Emily Durway. Hello, welcome. Durway. Hello, welcome, Emily.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Great.
Um, so just a little background. I know Emily from doing improv, uh, which hopefully once she wins this election, I will get to do more improv with her. But
Yes.
why don't you
I
tell
miss you.
us?
I
Why don't you
miss
tell us
you
what you're
all.
running for?
I'm running for Akron Ward 1 Council here in Akron. Ward 1 is an area that I affectionately call the witch's finger. It goes all the way from the University of Akron and my church, which is First Congregational Church at Union and Market. So that whole Akron, University of Akron campus. Then it goes up West Market Street through West Hill, a little bit of Highland Square, down through Merriman Hills, into the valley, over to Timber Top. And that area, there's a whole apartment buildings on both sides of Portage Trail, and then up to north, like the Northampton area. It goes all the way actually to State Road and to Bath Road. In fact, people who are up there have an address of Cuyahoga Falls, but they are Akronites.
Fascinating. That almost makes me gerrymandering's crazy. But that almost like because I don't think I can vote for you, but like your description almost made me go, should I double check that? But I don't think I can.
No, you can't vote for me, Ruben. Thank you, though. I
Okay.
appreciate your support nonetheless.
Yeah, no. Man, gerrymandering is wild though. Like that is not like when you described that, my thought was that's a wild ward.
It's a
Okay.
thin ward. It's a very narrow, long strip.
Yeah, no, it's like a French fry. Or
Yes.
or like you said, a witch's finger.
Yeah, it bends sort of, you know.
Oh, okay. All right.
So it goes all the way from keep on calling because it starts here at the University of Akron. It goes through West Hill, a little bit of Highland Square, and then up to Northampton. You know, it's interesting. Ward 1 a lot of times is seen as Highland Square, but it's not really. There's basically three wards, two and maybe three, depending on what you consider Highland Square, that take over Highland Square. So it's actually Ward 1, Ward 4, and sort of Ward 8 a little bit. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So people
You
don't think of it as that though.
that like when you think about it as an average person, like I can't help but feel like there's a part of your brain that goes like, well, if I'm in this city or this neighborhood, it should be as simple as that, but it really is not.
Yeah, it isn't. In fact, you really have to look because on both sides of Merriman Road, on one side of Merriman Road, it's Ward 1, and right across on the other side is Ward 8. So the ward literally splits down Merriman.
That
Yeah.
it seems so wildly counterintuitive the way these things are done. Um, the theater I
Yeah.
work the theater I work with up in Cleveland, Imposters, is always trying to get their liquor license a while ago, and like the thing is that you have to go to people who are in like your voting like block district or whatever to get them to sign the petition, and
Yeah.
like there were people who like lived by the theater who were like just outside of that voting block. It it's wild how these things are set up.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think because there is times when Akron was trying to expand its footprint. And when it did that, it expanded Akron water and sewer and trash. And when they did that, it sort of created some of these fingers and they go
Mhm.
off into Cuyahoga Falls or off towards Coventry and stuff like that. And you'll see that represented, which is how some people have Cuyahoga Fall addresses, but they are Akronites.
Why make it? Because why make it simple? Now,
No, simple is for, other people,
yeah.
you know.
Now, so you're running for this position now.
Correct.
So what are the issues that a person running for city council? This is for city council, correct?
Yes, it is.
So what is it? What kind of issues is a person running for city council looking at to represent?
Well, in our campaign, we're focused on four separate things, although all of them really connect.
Okay.
So we're looking at housing issues, we're looking at issues having to do with criminal justice reform, the arts, and also economic development and balanced economic development.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to housing, it seems like it's the number one issue of everybody in our ward, and probably true throughout Akron even. We're
Okay.
looking at ways that we can help renters have more of a sure footing when they're having issues with problem landlords, especially landlords that are out of town, out of city, out of county, out of state.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we're looking at is an ordinance that is similar to, I think Dayton and Cleveland have this ordinance where there's higher fines and civil fines for landlords who are out of state that don't have a local representative, not just that can take papers and be served and an attorney, but actually can make decisions, looking at trying to keep people local. It also might, there's been a slew of different corporations have come in and bought like property, houses in our ward over the past, 4 years, like 4 or 5 years during the pandemic. Looking at how we can make sure those properties, if they're not being lived in or taken care of, if they're out of town landlords, they're being taken care of properly, that they aren't bringing the neighborhood down. And also, if they're available for rent or for buying, that we are allowing people in our neighborhoods to be able to move from renting to buying. I was a renter until literally January, my entire adult life. I've never owned a house. This is the first house I've ever owned. I just bought it. I
Wow.
was looking for it for 2 years. It's really hard to buy a house. It's a long process. It's all the things you weren't taught when you were in high school or college, and it's very challenging as a single person too to do that. I found a lot of roadblocks, but I was able to get through with a lot of help, support, and research. I'll tell you, I took advantage of the first time homeowners grant that's from the state of Ohio, that people who are buying their house for the first time can to apply for that money. And if they qualify based on their income, and I think where they live and where they're trying to buy and stuff like that, you can qualify for that. That helps with the down payment, because not only do you have to pay for a down payment, you have to pay for all the closing costs that can be equal to or at least half of the down payment. You have to, yeah, it's crazy. You have to pay for inspections. I wouldn't even look at places unless I could have an inspector. I really wanted an older house. And so in this neighborhood, there's so many great old houses that have great bones. But if it had something fundamentally wrong with it, I don't have a wealthy family. I don't have people who can financially give me $20,000 to suddenly be able to renovate an old house. I would have loved to do that, but most of us can't do that. So having an inspection, make sure it was solid, it wasn't going to fall apart the next week, and that it was a valid investment. And then looking for something that also probably has some problems so that I could afford it, problems I could fix or that were livable with. So
Reasonable problem.
reasonable problems,
A,
not fundamental, not structural.
a
So
reasonably problematic house.
right. And I found one and I love it. And I love my street. And everybody's been so wonderful. But it is a huge step. And it is a big payment every month. And it's challenging. And it's hard to move from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's things I loved about renting too. I like being able to do what I want to do with the house, though. That's going to be nice.
Oh yeah.
And the last apartment I had, I have been trained in like urban gardening since I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted a place where I could do some urban gardening.
Nice.
And a lot of there are some places that have plots around the Highland Square area in West Hill that are really cool. There's one nearby Edgerton that I wanted to get into, but the last time I checked, they didn't have any more room. So having space to do some of that is sort of great. So we'll see as the spring comes. I'm busy now, so who knows if I'll be able to do a garden this year.
So you're very familiar with the need to have like laws and regulations related to housing then.
Yeah, and I would say that it's one of my I want people who are renting to be able to have a better on ramp for being able to advocate for themselves. Right now, the community legal aid has great resources on their website. They're really great. But I'd like to also reduce the burden for tenants. Number one, having local or neighborhood education meetings where people learn how to take care of like maybe escrow and things like that, to make sure that if there is a problem with their land and they're having a problem with their landlord, they're able to escrow their rent and it's not that hard to do it, and people are educated on how to do that. I'd also like to see the level that is required to escrow your rent go down a little bit, so it's an easier way to put some pressure on your landlord to do things.
Okay.
I would also like to see some retaliation prevention in that housing idea, because a lot of times people are scared to bring up anything with their landlords because at that point they're on a month to month, they're not on a lease.
Yep.
And so they want to be able to stay there, or they want to be able to stay there the next year after that lease is up. If they're the ones who are complaining to get something done, even if it's important, they're scared to say anything a lot of times. So trying to find some sort of balance to that. I'd also like the landlords to be able to interrupt tenants that they think are really destroying or damaging their house or their home or their apartment buildings a little more easily. So there's got to be some tweaking we can do. There's code enforcement that we already have, but we need, and they do a great job, but we need more teeth and more penalties and more fines. Mm-hmm. Probably financial more than criminal, honestly, because those seem to have more effect on a corporation, obviously. Very few landlords are going to ever be put in jail. Mm-hmm. But, you know, getting a hefty fine that really causes them to have problems might actually move them to do something when they realize, fixing the water quicker or fixing that staircase outside that looks like it's going to be able to fall down soon is more expensive if they don't do it than if they do it, and do it sooner rather than later.
Totally makes sense. I have a lot of thoughts on landlords, but I don't want to alienate any landlords who might vote for you. Although I will just take a moment to be like, if there's only one thing I can think of that Adam Smith and Karl Marx agreed on, and it was that they did not like landlords. But out of state landlords, it's a real problem these days, which I can only see as causing problems personally.
Yeah. It is a big problem. And also just corporations coming in, buying stuff, and then we don't even know what they're going to do with it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're rehabbing it. Sometimes they're turning it into Airbnbs.
Yeah.
There's a variety of things. And sometimes I'd like some of these houses to be residential. It's hard for me to find a house. It's hard for anybody to find a house over the last few years because nobody is selling their property. And when old landlords are selling their property, it's usually because they haven't done any fixing upping of it recently, and so they're selling it to other people for cash. They're not accepting any bids that have any kind of tests or evaluations of the inspections of the place, and they'll say, no, we're just going to do this. We want 20% down or whatever. And that means that even those places are now a lot of times out of reach, and they could have been an individual who is a resident. If we want to keep Highland Square, if we want to keep West Hill, if we want to keep this whole area booming, we need to make sure that people have a place to go from renting to owning. and that renters, because 60% of us are renters, that renters have places and people they can go to when there are issues and options for moving to different places that aren't going to kill them in their rent too. So they can have the freedom to choose where they want to live and they're not just stuck in the same place for years because they can't afford to move. So those are some of the things I know that a lot of people are concerned about. Another thing is that as our population does grow older, there are people who are living in homes, and as they get older and they're retired and they own the house, they can't necessarily do the upkeep. Finding ways that we can move resources around so that people are able to have some support when they get older, when they're disabled, to able to keep that house. Because if we really care about generational wealth building, right, that's a big issue in the African American community, but it's a big issue with communities of poverty everywhere. If we're looking at wealth building,
Absolutely.
if we're letting a whole bunch of the houses sort of fall into ruin as the patriarchs and matriarchs of family get old and nobody's really there to help keep that house up, then when it is inherited by the next generation, there's so much work to be done that it's not actually building any wealth, it's building a burden. So finding a way that we can help people who are aging to have help with their house and also have help with canopy maintenance. There's a lot of money here with our arborist and a lot of funds in the city that go to planting trees and helping out with making sure there's tree planting and getting enough trees in the city. It's been a important process. There's been tree mapping. What I'd like to see is some funds also going into educating neighborhoods and homeowners and landlords on how they can maintain the trees that they have now. What kills trees? What can they do to help those trees so we don't have to plant them? There's trees around here that are, 40, 60, 100 years old. Finding ways we can actually support that already established growth here in Akron would be great. Our money might be really tight now that the federal government, we don't that's going to affect a lot of things in our city. But I think there's ways we can really focus on educating our own people, our own community, finding experts who are here and finding ways that we can actually work on a block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood basis to educate people on how to take care of trees themselves, how to take care of their homes, stuff like that. I've seen there are a bunch of groups here in Akron that actually they come together to help people fix up their own houses. Sometimes it's a group of friends. Sometimes they trade work. They all sort of in the Amish sense, go once a month and do a project in one person's house. There's ways that we can encourage that kind of community spirit and civic responsibility and civic connection with I think, inside of our ward that's just not being done right now.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, sounds like you have a lot. It sounds like you have a lot going on there, and those sound like incredibly important issues. Housing is huge right now across the country. So my understanding is that this is also a very competitive race. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah, there's two other people running actually. I'm the only woman. There's three people. There's three of us running in Ward 1. There's two people running in Ward 8. So there's actually a couple wards that have these important primaries. In our ward, in fact, in all of the candidates for city council, I'm the only woman currently running.
Okay. All right. Well, that's just something to consider, voters. Uh, um, Now my understanding. So, well, obviously, I'm rooting for you.
I can't tell that you're biased at all.
Yep. No. Um, I don't know what kind of campaign you and or they are running, but you actually, you know what? Maybe I'll save why you're the better candidate for the end. Uh, so let's okay. So we talked about housing.
Yes.
You mentioned three other major components, and let's see, it was housing, and then what was the second one?
Criminal justice and criminal justice reform.
Of course, very important.
Yes.
um, something that almost every city I can think of needs. Although to be fair, I haven't seen like what the comparisons are between different cities. But
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, that's
Sorry.
something that America in general needs.
I would say that's accurate.
Mhm. Is there anything in particular that your campaign is currently leading with on this, or is it more of a broader thing?
Some of it's definitely broader. A lot of it has to do with things that need to be changed, possibly in the next time we're negotiating with the next time there's negotiations with the police labor union. So making sure there's certain things that are followed, that we have good policies in the Akron Police Department, and making sure those policies are required as part of that contract.
Of
And
course.
following those policies, then have some sort of uh, not following those policies actually have some issues of like what's going to happen. What are the consequences that are real when you don't follow those policies? How does the police department actually review those issues? Are they just always going to, no matter the policy failings, no matter not following those rules, those different rules of engagement with our citizenry, will they always find ways to defend it? Is there ever going to be a time when we actually have rules that need to be followed and not excused? So I feel a lot of times right now there's just a lot of excuse, and so it becomes the us versus them. And
Mm,
if we're going to have a quality police department,
mm,
we need we not only need people who are born and raised in Akron and who become police officers from our actual community,
mhm,
but we also need some amount of community policing. Community policing really helps out not only people understanding what's going on, have a connection with the police. At some point or another, we all have to call the police for one thing or another, usually. There's a lot of times something will happen. But in the end, the police often are there after a crime has been committed.
mhm,
They're not there in the middle of that crime. They're there to report on the crime, research the crime, maybe try to catch the person who committed the crime, and sometimes just document the crime.
mhm,
But they're there afterwards. So there's other things we need to do in our communities to keep ourselves safe and keep everybody else safe that I also think will help with some of that. So there's been a lot of issues up in Highland Square with people after hours and parking lots. I would have liked to see a more community policing type response to that. So people are walking around. There's police officers who actually have a beat, who monitor that area, and not just monitor it, but actually get to know people. I
mhm,
feel like oftentimes when officers are in cars, they're able to speed off so they can all go to one place, but you're missing a lot of the human connection that we all really, I
mhm,
believe, need in order to find validation and understanding that that's Officer Smith. And I know Officer Smith, and I know he's not going to shoot me if he comes to my house to investigate what I believe is a crime. Hopefully, it'll make people not scared to call the police too, because that's also an issue.
mhm.
People shouldn't be scared when they have to call the police.
I think that there's a real problem in this country right now where there are a lot of people who are quick to defend the police regardless of the police's actions, and I don't think we understand that this is actually damaging to the police themselves. Like every time the police try to be overly defensive, and every time it looks like they anytime there looks like there's not accountability happening, all we are doing is making our policing practices unsustainable. And a big part of that is absolutely connection to the community. Um, if your police officers are your neighbors, they're gonna already see you as human. They're not just gonna be meeting you at the worst moment in your life. And that's huge. So yeah, no, I would have to agree with everything you're saying there.
Yeah, it's as simple as if there's a police officer on the street, there's a new person who moves in, they don't know that, you know, The guy I used to call Lion, who is mentally ill and always walking around Highland Square. He doesn't tend to bother anybody, but he is peculiar and he does walk through people's businesses and then leaves. He doesn't molest anybody. He doesn't ask for money or anything like that. But he's a specific person and he clearly has some mental health issues. Everybody would recognize him when they saw him. If you're new to an area, you might call the police because you don't know what this guy is doing. You don't know who he is. If a police officer is not new to the area and actually knows the area, they'd be able to say, hey, that's just what's his name. He's weird, but he's fine. He wanders around this neighborhood. He's not a problem. He's not a threat. Because when you create places where police are called to deal with people who have mental health issues or developmental issues, a lot of times they don't know where that person is coming from. So they don't know if they're harmless or not. They're assuming the worst.
Absolutely.
And it creates sort of an already difficult event to automatically become confrontational. If somebody isn't looking you in the eye and you're a police officer and you think everybody should be looking in your eye because that's how you know they're telling you the truth, and you don't understand that there's a bunch of people who can't look people in the eye, it becomes an issue, and it creates a tension and sometimes a violence that doesn't need to be there.
The two groups of people who are most likely to have, or statistically most likely to have, a negative interaction with a police officer, and I should say that I'm speaking for the country, not Akron specifically, are Black men and people with autism are statistically the most likely to have a negative outcome from a encounter with the police. And this is also just a problem in general for disabilities, mental health issues. All these things dramatically increase your chances of having a negative outcome with the police. I will say that my main interaction with the police is actually, I used to be an actor who worked in the crisis intervention training programs.
Okay.
Which are a great program, but they also are like basically just continuing education programs. Like, you're not required to take them. Just, it's an option that's available to police officers. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're a police officer, I highly encourage you to look into CIT training. It has a lot of value to offer, but even there are limitations that are put on the police in terms of what they can even do. And so few officers actually have this training to interact with people with mental health issues. It's a real problem.
Yeah, and they tend to attract, they're also people who are mentally ill and people who live in poverty and people who are also African American or not white tend to also be the victims of crime more than anybody else as well.
True.
Which means that they actually need support. They need resources that they can turn to protect themselves and their families. And yet it then creates this us-them where it's not seen as something helpful. And sometimes it isn't helpful. Sometimes calling the police isn't helpful.
Oh, yeah.
And can be difficult. I was at my church. We were having a community dinner. There was somebody there who started sort of threatening suicide. And not in a violent way or anything like that. Just seemed like he was threatening suicide. He wanted help. He wanted to go to a hospital. So I called 911 and I said, hey, there's this person here. I really would like an ambulance. I believe that they're having suicidal ideations. He's not threatening anybody. He's not dangerous. He's not loud. He's not anything. We need an ambulance to come and maybe take him to Akron General, to the psych triage department, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, even though that's what I told 911 and that's what they should have told the dispatch. What happened was 2 police cars showed up first before the ambulance. And I'm like, well, I told them not to send the police. We don't need the police. He's not a danger. He's not threatening to kill himself right here with a gun or, nothing like that.
Yeah.
He just needs an ambulance. And they don't always send. If I call and say I'm having a heart attack, they're not going to send the police to my house. So why are you doing that there? Right. So then the ambulance does come. They come inside. They come in with the police. The police come in. They're fine, but they're asking him all these questions. They even search his bag. They didn't ask permission, it looked like to me, but there's nothing in his bag. But there's no reason for that stuff to really have happened.
Yeah.
Just like the ambulance wouldn't have searched my bag if I was being taken in an ambulance to the hospital. There's no reason for this person who was not being
Yeah.
specific with their threats or anything like that. He was talking about laying it down in a ditch and dying. It's not like he is threatening to
Yeah.
shoot himself or shoot others. And yet that was the response. It was still fine. They took him to the hospital. There's nothing more that happened. It could have been worse, but it could have been just the ambulance to come pick him up and take him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times there's protocols that they have themselves that I'm not sure are serving us or the community.
I'll be honest. I don't trust a dispatcher.
Yeah.
Like I want to say what was
It's a
his
hard
name?
job, but yeah, I can see that. Like, I don't know what the dispatcher said, obviously, to the police.
And
I don't know why they called the police. Maybe it's a policy whenever somebody's claiming suicidal ideations. I don't know. I don't know if there's some policy connected to that or not, honestly. But finding a way we can interact with people who are having crises better would be great.
Yeah. And
would.
specific to the dispatch thing is there have been actually some incidents where dispatchers will leave out very important information that was given to them on the calls. Like I hope I don't miss. Oh man, it's been so long since I talked about this. I hope I'm not getting the name wrong, but like Tamir Rice.
Yeah.
One of the thing, like the person who called in that thing specifically said he didn't know if it was a real gun, but that information was never relayed over the from the dispatcher.
Definitely.
Which side note, if you don't know if it's a real gun, maybe don't call.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I know that I think his name was John Crawford. He was killed in the Walmart and he was just shopping for a, rifle, which you're allowed to do. He wasn't threatening anybody. Yeah. Some white guy went and called the police and said, hey, he's threatening people. Nobody else said that. He wasn't doing that. That guy just saw a black person with a gun and then reported it to dispatch. I don't know exactly what he said to dispatch, but I know that that's an issue before.
Imagine that, a guy in a store that sells guns holding a gun.
I know. It's just so many lives lost.
So obviously,
it's really upsetting.
So obviously that's a very important issue that America's having a real reckoning with right now. So let's hear, you also mentioned the arts and well, actually, let's go into the arts. Obviously arts are terrible. No, I'm kidding. Obviously I support the arts. Arts are very important.
Shocking, Ruben, shocking.
Yeah, no, shocking indeed. I view the arts as incredibly important to society in general, and Akron itself has a decent history of artists and an artistic community. And
yes, they do.
And like, of course, it waxes and wanes here and there. Sometimes there's a resurgence of art. Sometimes there's artists will slowly dissipate from the area.
Right.
But communities benefit from the arts. It's something that is so valuable to both community, but also like human nature itself. Like my number one complaint about AI is just like, sure, we could have AI make all our art, but like art itself is beneficial. The process of making it is beneficial to us as humans. So it seemed very counterintuitive to me.
There's a reason artists make art, and it's not to produce a product most of the time.
Yes.
It's to express something.
Sadly, though, our society is built on products. But yeah, no. So are there specific ways you're looking at the arts in terms of this?
I would like to see an ordinance here in Akron that follows some other cities across the state that requires that the city government dedicate 1% of their overall budget to arts, um, and not just public art, which I think is great, and I want to support public art, but also all sorts of other kind of art, both emerging artists and also established artists,
Mm-hmm.
so that we have a way to support the various artists that are here. Because arts keep a community alive, they keep it
Mm-hmm.
young, they keep families, a place where kids can participate in choral societies and theater and music and bands. It's an amazing thing. And so making sure we can do that. I myself, I'm part of both old art and new art. I played the violin for 14 years, sort of seriously, and I've always been very involved in classical music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a member of Tuesday Musical, which is, I think, 130 years old at this point, or something like that. I don't know. It's
Wow.
very old. I could be very wrong about that. But I think we already hit our 125th anniversary. So it's a very old group, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring nationally recognized classical artists to the city to play. They also, all of those artists that come here also spend time and energy with local students, usually in middle school or high school and college, to expose them to master classes and all sorts of other things. That is amazing. At the same time, I'm obviously very interested in theater. I've done theater before, and I've done acting before. I've done improv, obviously, for the past 8 years.
So
I think,
weird. Me too. No.
yeah, or 9 years, since 2016, I think. So
Okay.
yes, Ruben is the original OG when it comes to improv around here. But having ways to support those different places, no matter who is the mayor in charge as well. So having something that's sustainable, not overwhelming or overburdensome to the city, but also helps support it, because it does. It keeps families here. It keeps young people here. It keeps the economy. It's the unnamed, engine for a good balanced economy. Because if you have artists in an area that are working hard to create art, music, writing, sculpture, painting, poetry, whatever that art is, you have them working. They aren't necessarily doing it full time. They're doing nothing like that. But a lot of times, all those artists of all those different flavors want to share it with the community. That means you're having events, you're having theater shows, you're having various art shows, you're having places where people can hear maybe slam poetry or hear writing, or they get to read it, because there's little people who are printing their books as well. Whatever it is, you're also having places to display that. That encourages people to go out. It encourages people to eat out. It encourages people to patronize local companies and local restaurants and local bars, and participate a lot of times at the library. Like, there's a bunch of things that really are great about all those levels of artistic endeavor. We have a lot of people who are professional artists as well who live in Akron, and that is their full-time amazing job. And they are wonderful human beings. And it's great if we had a community that recognized that source of economic development and really supported it in a positive way.
Plus,
So it's a sign of health of economic growth of a community, honestly.
absolutely. And I do just want to point out to the voters, 1% is a very reasonable amount
Right?
of the budget. Like,
It really is.
I don't know what that is in terms of hard numbers, but like 1%, come on, if you can't give 1% to the artists, what are you even doing with your city?
Yeah.
It's
Right. And there's lots of amazing music festivals that are here. I help plan Porch Rocker. There's the Jazz and Blues Festival every fall. Now that we have a pretty active and amazing jazz and blues unit here at the University of Akron, like, there's amazing jazz and blues artists here that are nationally known and have gotten Grammys. I mean, there are obviously people who are musicians, songwriters who have also gotten that from our area. And it really is an engine that helps a community thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people don't respect or understand the arts, and that's okay to an extent, but they really need to at least come to grips with the fact that it does bring value to society. And artistic jobs are real jobs. These are things that are often overlooked. These are things that directly interact with the economy. These are things that bring people to your downtowns. These are things that get people to even want to go downtown. Like there's more to going downtown than drinking, people.
Yeah. Well, and really like that is one of the things that gets people to do anything is the idea of going and enjoying art, music, theater, visual arts. The University of the Akron Art Museum is actually in Ward 1 as well. Um, all those places are so important. I'd like to see more places for visual arts to be able to be displayed in our neighborhood. With a lot of people who are artists who live here, there's not a lot of places since the pandemic and before where you could display art. I'd like to see more locations around here where artists can work and live and hopefully also show their work. So I'd like
Absolutely.
more access to maybe some more community stages where it's not just one theater company, although I love the theater companies we have. But I'd like to see some community theater places that we can access, whether that's through CLCs maybe or other methods of sort of accessing stages that we can share. So that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at as well.
Awesome. I love everything I'm hearing on that. Uh and what was the fourth thing?
Economic development. But as you see,
Fourth.
all of these things are really intertwined.
Yeah.
If you have artists in your area, then you have to have, housing that's solid and supportive. If you want those artists to stay and grow, you also have to have ways that they can support their families that inevitably will come as people live here and they don't feel like they have to move in order to have a safe or wonderful or reasonable space for their family or children to grow up in. All of that means having places that are close by. One of the great things about our area that I just really love, and everybody I've talked to has really spoken about it, is our access to green spaces here in this part of our town. So, where I live, and every place I've lived in Ward 1, and I've lived here for about 12, 13 years, something like that, it's really accessible to so many hiking paths, both inside our ward itself, but Cascade Plaza downtown, the tow path. There's also, it's really close to um, the national park, like National Cuyahoga National Park. There's just so many places around here to access. So we have the benefit of being able to go for a hike somewhere really nice and serene, very close by. And then we can go to a show, go see Ohio Shakespeare down at Grainstone or over at Stan Hewitt during at night. That can be a Saturday for people. So
Mm-hmm.
you could go do something for free, which is enjoy the parks with your family, go have a picnic, and then go pay for a couple tickets to go see Ohio Shakes. And that's an amazing Saturday. And that is not a horribly expensive Saturday, but it's a very enriching Saturday that we can all take advantage of once in a while.
Absolutely. It's got everything you need.
Yeah.
Nature and art.
Yeah.
The things that heal the human soul.
And food. So you should also stop
Yeah.
by Sweet Mary's and get a couple of their croissants that are amazing or some of their vegan treats that are so good if you're vegan. Like they're amazing. They have gluten-free stuff. All their stuff is homemade and delicious. Get a couple of those things to share afterwards too.
Nice. Very nice. So we've hit the four major things.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, what do the people need to know to understand why Emily Durway is the person for the job?
Well, I've worked my whole life as an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I've been an activist. I started off doing community organizing and
Like Obama.
like Obama in 2008, but even before that, when I was in Milwaukee, I was an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer, and I helped plan a 1,200 people march to try to get changes in welfare reform and get more education and training for people who were soon to be kicked off those roles. We got a lot of contact with a lot of people in Madison when we were doing that. In addition to that, I started doing community organizing around changing the way our criminal justice system handled nonviolent drug offenders. So I helped create the First Day Reporting Center, and I helped actually plan and program it. I I created a program that was a restorative justice program focused on sort of a service learning technique for civic involvement for people who were in the program. So it wasn't just a community service class, it was also a civics class.
Nice.
That focused on doing important good service to the community. So we weren't just going in and sweeping up the floor, but we were actually trained by Will Allen to do organic gardening in the city.
Oh wow.
We were working with a group of people to help write a play that reflect their point of view for their experiences in their life. Also, in a small area of that town in Milwaukee, we did things like educate on not just working for the Red Cross, but what the Red Cross did and do some training there. We did a bunch of different stuff like that. So it was trying to find a way to not only do service to a community, but not just the regular community service, but something that actually connected people to the civic world that we had. So people came out of the program feeling like they're more connected to their city and their community. Because in the end, that's what actually reduces crime. That's what reduces recidivism, is the way people re-enter society after they've had a brush with the criminal justice system. And so often that's sort of ignored, or it creates sort of rules that people have to follow instead of positive ways to re-engage. So my experience with that also led me to coming to law school and becoming an individual advocate. And I've been a criminal defense attorney for now since 2008, a trial attorney. I defend people's civil rights and defend people against criminal allegations every day that I go to work. It's something I hold very dear to me, and I think is a very important part of our system and our democracy. And at the same time, I still have a big desire for systemic change. That's one thing I have not been able to do that much of as an attorney for individuals. And I think you need that sort of combination of experiences with advocating for people on an individual basis, because as a city council person, I'm going to be advocating for individuals. Individuals are going to be calling the office, needing support. I need to talk to individuals like I have been throughout this race to hear what individuals from all parts of the spectrum here in Ward 1 really care about, really love about our community, and what they'd like to see improved. I think that combination of activism and systemic understanding of policy and systemic change makes me unique. I'm the only one who really has that combination. And I think I could serve Ward 1 well with those skills.
I believe you could. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on? Or do you think you've hit all the most important things to you?
I've hit a lot of things. I just want to say our election is May 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Please come out and please vote for us. There's a couple events that are coming up that are really awesome that people should go to. One of which is this Thursday at the Steel Workers Labor Hall that's down on Kelly. I think I put something up on my stories today, and I did a video earlier. Actually, I did a video yesterday that I need to post about it. So that's happening this Thursday at 6 o'clock. I believe it's a forum with Freedom Bloc and with Progressive Democratic Party. They're coming together to look at strategies for really how we can work together to sort of fight some of this stuff that Trump is doing to really try to gut out support and resources for cities. In addition to that, I have a canvassing day this Saturday from 9:30 we're meeting together, but we're canvassing like from 10 to 12 and from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4:30. We're going to serve lunch. Everybody's welcome to come out and canvass. We're going to have different places where people can go and walk around and pass out literature and hopefully talk to some people about our community. It should be a lot of fun. And then I have two community meet and greets. We're calling them community social hours. One's on April 4th, no, April 5th, Saturday, April 5th. It's at the Highland Square Library from 1 until 3:30. And the other one is on April 19th, and that's at House 330 at the Starbucks, and that starts at 3 o'clock. So we are meeting those places. You can come there. You can share with me what you care about your community. You can ask me questions. Just a time to get to know everybody. So I'm really excited for all those events. I just found out today that the League of Women Voters is having a candidate forum. That's going to be the last Monday of April, which I believe is April 28th. It's going to be at the library downtown, and it's going to start at 5:30.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that there will be one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was so glad that they are doing one.
Yes, absolutely. The public deserves to meet the candidates.
I agree.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. And I promise not to slander them until I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm kidding.
No.
I won't talk about them at all. But
They're all good people, and I'm glad. I'm really glad. I think it shows you the level of civic health in our community, the fact that people are vying for these positions, that while one person was picked to like just be there for a year, in general, it's giving our community a real chance to choose who we want to represent us. And I know that, representing us is really important to me.
okay. All right. Well,
Thank you, Ruben. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you.
oh yes, absolutely. Thank you for coming on to my podcast.
Sure.
I'm always down to bring in some politicians. Uh People act like that's a dirty word, but it's actually just a job our society requires. Um
I never thought I'd be one. It's bizarre that I actually ran.
yeah,
I've helped out with a lot of political stuff through the years, but I've never run. I never thought I would.
it's
Um,
it's
but I
never
saw the
been more
need.
important.
Yeah,
Never been more important.
I agree. I definitely agree. More people need to step up.
Oh,
People need to step up. They need to see what kind of skill set they have to help serve our communities.
mhm.
And we need everybody's voice right now because they're trying to silence everybody's voice. And so we all need to speak up.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Emily.
Thank you.
Please, everyone, remember to go out and vote May 6th.
May 6th, and go to Durway4ward1.com and you can donate to my campaign. You can volunteer. But we need money, and we need people to come join us and help
Absolutely.
fight for our community.
Absolutely. So please, everyone, do go check that out. Thank you for tuning in to Ruben Uncut. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share, especially this one. Share this one if you
Yes,
live
please.
in Ward 1. The people in Ward 1 need to know. And also, you can also email the program at rubenuncut@gmail.com if you're running for something, I guess. But yes, thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Emily, for joining me here.
Thank you, Ruben. This has been my pleasure. It's really great. And I just hope more and more people participate in our democracy. We need more voices.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever you are.